My name is Marjorie Colvin, 30 years old. Some people can pinpoint the exact moment their relationship ends. A fight, a betrayal, a slammed door. For me, it happened long before either of us said it out loud. The strange thing is, I didn't know it at the time. Logan Brooks and I had been together for 4 years. We moved in together 2 years earlier after he finished graduate school. From the outside, we looked solid. We had routines. Every morning I made coffee while he got dressed for work. We traded off cooking dinner. We spent evenings stretched across the couch, watching whatever series we were obsessed with that month. Weekends were for hiking trails, farmers markets, and lazy mornings that drifted into afternoon. It felt like a real life. A future. At least, that's what I believed. Looking back now, the first signs were almost invisible. About 3 months before everything fell apart, Logan started thanking me differently. One Saturday morning, I cleaned the apartment like I always did. When I finished, he smiled and said, "You're such a good roommate." Roommate. Not girlfriend, not partner, just roommate. The word sat in my chest longer than it should have. Then, there were other things. When I told him I loved him, he stopped saying it back immediately. Instead it became, "You're the best," or "Thanks, babe." Tiny substitutions, small enough to ignore, large enough to hurt. Around the same time, our 4th anniversary was approaching. 4 years felt significant. Important. I suggested we finally visit a mountain bed, and breakfast he'd once said he loved. Instead of smiling, he looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. "Let's keep things low-key this year," he said. I frowned. "Why?" "I just want to focus on myself a little more." The answer sounded rehearsed. I remember studying his face, searching for something deeper hidden beneath the words. "What does that mean?" He forced a smile. "Personal growth." That was all. No explanation. No conversation. Just another wall between us. The distance kept growing after that. Logan started attending evening fitness classes that somehow always ran late. He spent more time with coworkers. More happy hours. More unexplained delays. Sometimes he came home smelling like wine and expensive restaurants. Sometimes he barely looked at me before disappearing into the shower. His phone practically became an extra limb. Whenever I walked near him, the screen tilted away. When I asked about his day, the answers got shorter. Work was fine. Nothing interesting. It was good. Conversations that used to last an hour now died in 30 seconds. I felt like I was watching him through glass. Close enough to see. Too far away to touch. Still, I convinced myself I was overthinking. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he needed space. Maybe relationships naturally changed after 4 years. So I gave him space. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe it simply delayed the inevitable. The conversation happened on a Sunday morning. I was under the bathroom sink trying to fix a grinding disposal unit that had been making noise all week. Water dripped from a pipe onto my wrist. Tools were scattered across the floor. Logan leaned against the doorway watching me. He looked nervous. Not sad. Not scared. Nervous. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. I glanced up. "Sure." Without getting upset? That question alone made my stomach tighten. But I nodded. He didn't wait for me to stand up. Didn't wait for me to put down the wrench. Didn't wait for a better moment. He simply said it. "You are my favorite person." My hands froze. "But I don't think I'm in love with you anymore." The room became very quiet. I feel like I'm living with my best friend instead of my girlfriend. The words weren't loud. They weren't cruel. They were heavy. Like concrete being lowered onto my chest. For a few seconds, all I could hear was water dripping from the pipe. Drip, drip, drip. I wiped my hands on a towel. Then I nodded. That actually explains a lot. His eyes widened. Clearly, that wasn't the reaction he expected. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, I walked past him, into the living room. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. A reservation confirmation appeared on the screen. A mountain cabin, booked 2 weeks earlier. The same weekend I had planned to propose. For months I'd imagined it. The overlook at sunset, the ring, the speech, the future. I had rehearsed everything, every word, every possibility, everything except this. Without saying a word, I clicked cancel. The confirmation disappeared, just like that. 4 years reduced to a cancellation email. Behind me, Logan looked confused. "What are you doing?" I closed the laptop, adjusting expectations. The engagement ring wasn't hidden in my car, or in a safe, or somewhere clever. It was sitting inside a kitchen drawer beneath the cutlery tray. A month earlier, I'd hidden it there, after first noticing the distance between us. Maybe some part of me had already sensed trouble. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, lifted the small velvet box. For a moment, I stared at it, at everything it represented. Then I quietly put it back, closed the drawer. The soft sound felt strangely final, like a chapter ending. Logan stood in the hallway watching me. He seemed confused, maybe even hurt. But I didn't explain. There was no point. The relationship had already ended. One of us was simply hearing about it later than the other. Later that week, I was folding laundry in the spare room when I heard Logan talking on the phone with one of his friends. His bedroom door was half open. He had the call on speaker while scrolling through something on his tablet. "How did Marjorie take it?" his friend asked. I stopped folding. Logan laughed softly. "Honestly? Better than I expected." "What? No crying?" "Nope." His friend chuckled. "Maybe she wasn't as in love with you as you thought." There was a pause. Then Logan laughed. A nervous laugh, but a laugh all the same. The sound hit harder than the breakup itself. Something inside me quietly switched off. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough. Enough to stop hoping, enough to stop waiting, enough to start seeing things clearly. That night, I made coffee for one person. The next morning, Logan walked into the kitchen, looked at the single mug on the counter, and frowned. "Didn't make mine?" I shrugged. I figured roommates make their own coffee. He stared at me. The expression on his face was impossible to read. Over the following days, I started making practical changes. I created a spreadsheet. Rent, utilities, internet, groceries. Everything split exactly down the middle. I canceled shared subscriptions, streaming services, meal deliveries, the gym membership. Then I emailed him the breakdown. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Seriously?" Logan asked. "I'm being accurate. You're being petty." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just treating this exactly the way you described it." For the first time since the breakup conversation, he had no response. And for the first time in months, I felt strangely calm. I didn't know it yet, but a much bigger truth was about to come out. A truth that would explain everything. And it would arrive through the last person I expected to take my side, his older sister, Rebecca. 3 days after that phone call, Rebecca showed up carrying 2 dusty storage boxes. "Logan left these at Mom and Dad's place," she said as I opened the door. Rebecca and I had always gotten along. She was 3 years older than Logan and far more grounded. While Logan worried about appearances, Rebecca cared about facts. I invited her inside. Logan was at work. For that, I was grateful. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee between us. For a while we talked about ordinary things. Work, weather, nothing important. Then Rebecca grew quiet. There was a strange tension in her face, like she was debating whether to say something. Finally, she sighed. "Can I tell you something?" I immediately knew it wasn't going to be good. "Sure. Off the record." I nodded. Rebecca looked down at her coffee cup. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Logan found the ring months ago." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. The ring? The engagement ring. My stomach dropped. The room suddenly felt smaller. What do you mean he found it? Rebecca rubbed her forehead. Around Christmas. He was looking for batteries in the kitchen drawer. He found the box underneath the tray. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at her. He opened it, she continued. Then he called me, freaking out. Every strange moment from the last few months flashed through my mind. The distance, the hesitation, the sudden obsession with personal growth, the emotional withdrawal, everything. When exactly did this happen? I asked quietly. Right after Christmas. The timeline matched perfectly. Painfully. Perfectly. Rebecca looked uncomfortable. He told me he wasn't ready for marriage. I laughed once. A humorless sound. No kidding. But that's not the worst part. I looked up. What is? Rebecca hesitated. Then she delivered the real blow. He didn't want to marry you. She paused. But he didn't want to lose you either. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Ugly. Honest. He wanted more time, she continued. He kept saying maybe his feelings would come back. Maybe he'd feel differently later. He wanted things to stay exactly the same while he figured himself out. I leaned back in my chair. Suddenly, I understood. The breakup wasn't honesty. It wasn't courage. It wasn't even respect. It was damage control. He had discovered a future he didn't want. Then he pulled away before I could ask for it, so he knew. Rebecca nodded. For months. And he never told me. No. I stared at the kitchen drawer across the room. The same drawer. The same ring. The same future that had quietly died before it ever had a chance. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Rebecca's expression softened. Because you deserve the truth. I swallowed hard. She continued. And because I think he's handled this horribly, neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Rebecca stood. Before leaving, she squeezed my shoulder. Marjorie, you weren't the problem. After she left, I sat alone for nearly an hour, just thinking, remembering, replaying conversations, looking for signs I had missed. The worst realization wasn't that Logan didn't want to marry me. It was that he had known how much I loved him, and still chose comfort over honesty. That evening, I moved the ring box. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I simply took it from the kitchen drawer and placed it inside my desk. Out of his space. Into mine. A week later, Logan's birthday arrived. Every year I'd planned something special. The first year was a surprise rooftop dinner. The second year was a weekend trip. Last year, I bought tickets to see his favorite band. This year, I bought him a candle. Just a candle. Nothing expensive. Nothing personal. A simple white candle from a small shop downtown. I placed it inside a gift bag with a handwritten card. The message read, I hope this year brings you clarity. Nothing more, nothing less. On the morning of his birthday, Logan walked into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. One plate sat on the counter. 1 cup of coffee. 1 place setting. He stopped. That's just for you? I didn't look up. Yes. His face tightened. Oh. Later that afternoon, he opened the gift. I watched from across the room. He stared at the candle. Then he read the card. His eyes lingered on the words. Longer than I expected. Finally, he looked up. That's it? I met his gaze. What were you expecting? His jaw tightened. Nothing. But his expression said otherwise. For the first time, he seemed to realize how much effort I used to pour into him, and how completely it was gone. That Saturday, he hosted his own birthday party. Friends crowded the apartment. Music echoed through every room. Laughter bounced off the walls. I stayed because it was still my home too. Mostly I kept to myself. Around midnight, everyone was drunk enough to stop filtering their thoughts, which is when everything exploded. A woman named Chloe, one of Logan's closest friends, lifted her drink and laughed. Oh my God. Everyone turned toward her. What? Someone asked. Chloe pointed at Logan. Remember when you found the ring? The room froze. My heartbeat slowed. Logan's face drained of color. Chloe kept going, completely oblivious. You were freaking out! Chloe, Logan interrupted sharply. But she ignored him. You literally called me crying because Marjorie was going to propose. Silence. Absolute silence. Every face turned toward Logan. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Chloe laughed. You thought she was going to ask before Valentine's Day. The room was dead quiet now. A few guests exchanged awkward looks. Someone muttered, Wait. What? Another friend stared at Logan. You knew? Logan looked trapped, like a man watching his carefully constructed story collapse around him. I stood slowly, set my drink down, and walked toward my bedroom. Behind me, I heard Logan calling my name. I didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him, because for the second time, I had received confirmation of what I already knew. Only this time, there were witnesses. The morning after Logan's birthday party, I woke up to a flood of notifications. At some point during the night, Logan had posted a photo from the celebration on Instagram. In the picture, he was smiling while blowing out candles. The caption read, Sometimes love changes form, and that's okay. Growth isn't always easy. A heart emoji, a star emoji, a carefully crafted image of maturity, of acceptance, of emotional wisdom. The comments told a different story. People who knew us immediately started asking questions. Wait, aren't you two still living together? Didn't you guys talk about getting engaged? Something feels off here. The comments multiplied throughout the morning. Apparently, several people from the party had already been talking. By noon, the post disappeared, but the damage was done. The story Logan wanted people to believe was beginning to crack. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. His friends started pulling away. Not all of them, but enough. A few reached out to me privately. Some apologized for assumptions they had made. Others admitted they never knew Logan had discovered the ring months earlier. I didn't encourage the conversations. I wasn't interested in turning anyone against him. I simply answered honestly when asked. Then I moved on. Meanwhile, life inside the apartment became increasingly uncomfortable. For Logan, not for me. I had already accepted the relationship was over. He hadn't accepted the consequences. He started finding excuses to be around me. When I watched television, he'd sit on the opposite end of the couch. When I worked in the kitchen, he'd suddenly need something from the refrigerator. When I went for walks, he'd ask where I was going. The same man who had spent months pulling away now seemed unable to handle distance. One evening, he cooked dinner. My favorite pasta. The recipe he rarely made. As I walked through the kitchen, he smiled. Hopefully. I made extra. Thanks. I grabbed a bottle of water. Nothing else. His smile faded. You don't want any? No. Why not? I shrugged. I'm not hungry. The disappointment in his face was impossible to miss. But I kept walking, because I finally understood something. He wasn't missing me. He was missing what I did for him. A few weeks later, he caught a bad cold. Nothing serious. Just enough to keep him miserable. One afternoon, my phone buzzed while I worked from home. A message from Logan. Could you pick up medicine on your way back? I stared at the screen, then typed a response. DoorDash delivers faster than I do. Feel better soon. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. That evening, I overheard him complaining to his mother on the phone. She's become so cold. I put on headphones and continued working. The irony was almost unbearable. Months of emotional withdrawal from him had been called personal growth. A few weeks of boundaries from me were suddenly cruelty. Then Rebecca visited again. This time she wasn't smiling. She went straight into Logan's room. The door closed. The argument started almost immediately. Their voices carried through the walls. Sharp, angry, raw. 40 minutes later, Rebecca emerged. Her expression said everything. "What happened?" I asked. She sighed heavily. He finally admitted it. I already knew what she meant. "Still," I asked. "Admitted what?" Rebecca crossed her arms. "He never wanted to marry you." I nodded. "That part isn't exactly news." "No." She shook her head. "The real truth is worse." My stomach tightened. "What truth?" Rebecca looked directly at me. "He wanted to keep you." The room fell silent. He didn't want marriage. He didn't want commitment. He didn't want a future. But he wanted you to stay. Every word felt like another piece of a puzzle clicking into place. He wanted the apartment, the routines, the support, the comfort. Rebecca's voice hardened. He wanted all the benefits, without any responsibility. For some reason, hearing it phrased that way hurt less, because it finally made sense. I wasn't mourning a great love. I was mourning an illusion. That night, Logan approached me while I was making dinner. The apartment was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. "Can we talk?" he asked. I continued chopping vegetables. "About what?" "Us." I almost laughed. "There is no us." He stepped closer. "Please." Something in his voice sounded different. Fragile. Broken. I finally looked up. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. I said nothing. I was scared. Still nothing. I didn't know what I wanted. I placed the knife on the counter. For the first time in months, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of losing me, of facing himself. His voice cracked. I didn't realize what I was giving up. There it was. The confession. The apology. The regret. Months too late. "I still love you." I looked at him for a long moment, then slowly shook my head. "No." His face fell. "No? You love what I did for you." He flinched. I continued. "You loved having someone who cooked, someone who listened, someone who fixed problems, someone who organized your life." His eyes filled with tears. "That's not true." "It is." I stepped back. "You didn't love me enough to choose me." The words landed harder than I intended. But they were true. Painfully true. You loved comfort. I pointed toward the apartment around us. This. The life we built. The convenience. The stability. You loved everything except the commitment. Tears rolled down his face. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Nothing. And that was how I knew it was over. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. A week later, I told him I was ending the lease early. The panic was immediate. "You can't be serious." "I already signed paperwork." His face went white. "You already what?" I calmly explained everything. The new place. A small house outside Portland. 2 bedrooms. A yard. A garage. A fresh start. Logan stared at me. "You already decided?" "Yes. Without me." The words remained unspoken, but I heard them anyway. For the first time, he understood exactly what I had felt when he ended our relationship without giving me a choice. The next month, I packed my life into boxes, books, clothes, kitchen supplies, memories. I left the couch. I left the television. I left dozens of things I didn't need anymore. On my final day, Logan stood beside the front door while I loaded the last box into my car. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the parking lot. "Can we at least stay friends?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I had once planned to marry. The man who had found my ring and quietly started planning his exit. Then I gave him the only answer I had left. Comfort was never the problem. His eyes filled with tears. "You just confused comfort with love." For once, he had nothing to say. I got into my car. started the engine, and drove away. Months later, sitting on the porch of my new house, watching the sunset paint the sky gold, I realized something. Losing Logan hadn't ruined my life. It had given it back to me. Not long after moving, I met a man named Ethan Walker on a hiking trail near my house, a civil engineer. Direct, honest, kind, no games, no hidden meanings, no fear of commitment. One evening after dinner, we sat watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Ethan smiled and said something that stayed with me. "I don't do almost." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means either we're building something real or we're not. I don't have the energy for anything in between." I smiled, because for the first time in a very long time, neither did I. The hardest lesson Logan ever taught me wasn't about heartbreak. It was about self-worth. Love isn't maintenance. Love isn't convenience. Love isn't keeping someone around because they make your life easier. Love is choosing someone completely, every day, without hesitation, without backup plans, without fear. And now, for the first time, I knew the difference.